The attic above me. Portland, Oregon, winter of 2018. The silence after she left it had been 2 weeks since Emma's roommate, Kara, moved out. The house, once filled with chatter and laughter, now felt painfully still. The townhouse was narrow but cozy, exposed brick walls, creaky stairs, and a single attic door with a pull-down ladder that she'd never once opened. At first, Emma enjoyed the quiet. She'd come home from her barista shift, light a candle, and watch snow collect outside the frosted windows. But as nights grew colder, she began hearing things, faint thuds above her bedroom ceiling. It wasn't constant, just a sound here, a soft creak there. She blamed it on the wind, on the old wood contracting from the cold. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate. Crossing from one end of the ceiling to the other, Emma froze under her blanket, heart hammering, holding her breath to listen. It stopped as soon as she did. The next morning she called her landlord, Mr. Hanley, who said, "Probably raccoons. Happens every winter. I'll send someone next week." She tried to laugh it off, but when she looked up that evening, she saw a single piece of insulation drifting down from the attic door, like dust shaken loose by movement. That night, the footsteps returned, this time closer, and just before she fell asleep, a soft, raspy whisper filtered through the vent above her bed. "Don't turn on the light." The missing food. The next few days were strange. Items started moving. Her cereal box was empty, though she hadn't touched it. Leftovers vanished from the fridge. She assumed she was just distracted or forgetful from stress. Still, she couldn't shake the unease. Every time she entered the kitchen, she felt watched, that invisible pressure of eyes lingering just out of sight. One night, she set a small trap. She balanced a stack of plastic cups near the fridge door before bed. If anyone opened it, the cups would fall. At 3:12 a.m., she woke to the clattering sound of them hitting the floor. Emma grabbed her phone flashlight, heart pounding, and tiptoed into the kitchen. The fridge door was slightly ajar. The cold air spilled out like mist. Nothing else seemed disturbed, until she noticed the attic ladder hanging halfway down. Her chest went cold. She hadn't touched that ladder since moving in. The air smelled faintly of sweat and something else, metallic, sour. She backed up slowly, phone trembling in her hand. Just as she reached for the front door, a low thump echoed from above, followed by slow dragging sounds. Emma called 911, whispering to the dispatcher, "Someone's in my attic." The police arrived within minutes. They checked every room, then the attic. Nothing. "Probably an animal," one officer said. "Or your mind playing tricks. Happens when you're alone too long." But Emma wasn't convinced, because when she looked at her fridge again, the milk had been moved to the counter, and the cap was still unscrewed. Shadows in the ceiling the next morning. Emma called in sick. She couldn't bring herself to leave the house. The silence now carried weight, like it was holding its breath. She pushed a chair beneath the attic door and stared up at it for a long time. The latch was dusty except for one clear handprint, larger than hers. She snapped a picture, sent it to Kara, jokingly texting, "Guess I've got a ghost roommate." Kara replied instantly, "You sure that wasn't there before?" "You always hated attics." Emma smiled faintly but didn't answer, because she was staring at the photo again, noticing something she hadn't before. In the corner of the picture, just beneath the attic gap, a sliver of a face. She dropped her phone. That night she barely slept. She could hear faint scraping from above, like someone dragging a chair or shifting boxes. The sounds would stop whenever she turned on a light. She finally recorded the noise on her phone, playing it back in the morning, and her stomach turned. There was breathing. Deep human breathing. She sent the clip to her landlord, who finally agreed to inspect the attic. "I'll swing by after work," he said. Hours later, as dusk fell, Emma waited. But he never came. At 10 p.m. she called his cell. Straight to voicemail. Then, as she hung up, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. A man's voice whispered through the static, "Stop recording me." The smell of decay. The next day, the air in the house was foul, a stench that seemed to seep through the vents. Something between mold and rot. Emma opened every window, sprayed air freshener, even lit candles, but nothing helped. She finally called pest control, convinced an animal had died in the attic. The technician arrived, a middle-aged guy named Ray wearing a respirator mask. He pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, flashlight in hand. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. "Ray?" Emma called out. No answer. Suddenly he scrambled down, pale and shaking. "You need to leave now." "What? Why?" She stammered. "There's someone living up there." The words hit her like ice. Ray called the police as they both waited outside. When officers arrived and entered the attic, they found a small, filthy nest, blankets, water bottles, food wrappers, and piles of Emma's belongings, her clothes, her makeup, even her missing toothbrush. But the worst part was the smell, not just rot but decay. Hidden behind insulation was a sleeping bag, and inside it a mummified body. Male, mid-40s, been dead for months. Emma's knees gave out as officers carried the remains down. One officer murmured, "Must have been squatting here long before you moved in." But if he'd been dead for months, then who had opened the fridge last night? The return, the police sealed the attic and began their investigation. The medical examiner confirmed the man had died around November, almost 3 months before Emma moved in. They found a journal. Among his things, pages filled with ramblings about the girl who lives below, even though no one had lived there. Yet Emma tried to move past it, sleeping on her couch with the lights on. But the noise started again, not from above this time, but from inside the walls. Late at night, she heard faint scratching near the vents, the sound of slow breathing between the pipes. Terrified, she recorded it again. This time the playback captured words. Muffled but unmistakable. She found him. She shouldn't have. The next day she called the police again. They tore open part of the drywall but found nothing. One officer, pity in his voice, told her, "You've been through a trauma. Maybe your mind's just still in shock." She wanted to believe that until that night, when her living room TV flickered on by itself. The screen was static for a moment before showing footage from her own hallway camera. Live. The timestamp blinked, and in the corner of the frame, just behind her, stood a figure. The man in the vent. Emma spun around, phone flashlight trembling. No one there. She replayed the clip. The figure had been tall, broad-shouldered, face obscured in shadow. She ran to the front door, locked. Checked every window, sealed tight. Her breathing came in quick bursts, then a soft tapping from the vent behind her couch. She crouched, heart thundering, and listened, breathing. A whisper. "Don't call them again." Emma screamed and bolted out the door barefoot, calling 911 from the street. Police returned within minutes. They tore open the vent system and found something horrifying. Narrow crawl spaces between the walls that ran the length of the townhouse. Inside were drag marks, dirt and a half-eaten sandwich. Someone had been moving through the walls, but they never found him. The crawl spaces were too narrow for anyone to hide for long. That night, Emma stayed in a motel. She received a message on her phone from an unknown number, a photo taken inside her house. She could see herself, standing by the vent, flashlight in hand. The caption read, "You look scared tonight." The trap determined to end it. Emma contacted a private security firm. They installed hidden motion sensors and cameras throughout the house. For 2 nights, nothing happened. Then on the 3rd night, a motion alert pinged at 2:47 a.m. Footage showed the attic ladder slowly lowering on its own. Then, a man's arm. Pale, filthy, he climbed down quietly, barefoot, moving toward the kitchen. His eyes glinted briefly in the dark, hollow. Sunken Emma, watching from her motel room via phone, called 911 instantly. Police surrounded the townhouse and entered silently. They found him crouched under the sink, clutching a knife. He wasn't the man who died earlier. He was someone else entirely, another drifter, who claimed he'd followed the voices of the first man. He'd been living inside the walls since Emma moved in, feeding on her food, watching her through vents and ceiling gaps. As he was dragged away screaming, he shouted one thing over and over. "He told me to stay close to her." The Man in the Driveway, Flagstaff, Arizona, winter 2020. The first knock-it was a Tuesday night, freezing, quiet, and too still for comfort. The wind howled through the pine trees that surrounded Lauren's 1-story home on the outskirts of Flagstaff. She'd just finished her night shift, exhaustion clinging to her bones. By 1 a.m., she was curled on the couch, watching reruns of Dateline half asleep. When she heard the knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps, she froze. Her porch light was off, and her driveway stretched into the woods. No close neighbors, no reason for anyone to be here. The knock came again. Louder this time. Heart racing, she tiptoed to the window and peeked through the blinds. Nothing. Then, her motion light clicked on. A man stood at the end of the driveway, hands in his pockets facing her house. He wasn't moving, just watching. She tried to rationalize. Maybe a lost traveler, maybe a neighbor with car trouble. But the longer she watched, the less it made sense. He wasn't walking toward the door or away, just standing. Lauren stepped back from the blinds, pulse pounding in her ears. After a few minutes, the motion light shut off. The voices outside Lauren grabbed her phone, hands trembling, and dialed 911. "Someone's outside my house," she whispered. The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Stay inside. Lock all doors and windows. Officers are on their way." She moved quickly, checking each door. Her back door lock was half-turned, not how she'd left it. Her breath hitched. She twisted it shut and stepped back, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking questions, keeping her calm. Then Lauren heard something through the phone, a faint male voice, not through the line. From outside, Lauren, her name, drawn out, almost taunting. She dropped to her knees, crawling toward the hallway where there were no windows. "He knows my name," she whispered into the phone. "Officers are 5 minutes out. Stay hidden." But then another voice joined in, higher, slower, mimicking the first. "Lauren, open up." 2 voices now, both just outside the walls. The sound of gravel crunched as if they were pacing. Then laughter. Soft, deliberate laughter that made her skin crawl. The dispatcher's voice cut through. "Lauren, stay where you are," she tried to answer, but her words were drowned out by a new sound. The squeal of metal, her front door handle, twisting, the scratching at the window. By the time the police arrived, the men were gone. The officers checked the property. Footprints in the snow leading from her driveway into the woods. "Probably drifters," one said, trying to reassure her. "We'll patrol the area tonight." Lauren barely slept. Every creak, every groan of the house made her heart jump. The next evening, she tried to convince herself it was over. She double-checked locks, left lights on in every room, and even pulled her couch closer to the window to keep an eye on the driveway. Around midnight, as snow fell in thick flakes, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Nice house, Lauren." She stared at the screen, her pulse hammering. Another text came in. "You shouldn't live out here alone." She ran to her bedroom window, nothing but white snow and dark pine. Then something faint caught her eye. Movement near the side of the house, a shadow, then scratching, a soft, rhythmic sound against the glass. Lauren held her breath, phone flashlight trembling as she crept closer. A handprint appeared on the outside of the window, long fingers pressed flat against the glass. Then slowly, a face. Pale, smiling, eyes wide. Lauren screamed and backed away, knocking over her lamp. When she looked again, the figure was gone. But the handprint stayed, and written in the condensation beneath it were the words, "We missed you." The camera feed. The next morning, Lauren called the police again. They promised to send extra patrols, but she could tell they didn't believe her. Her friend Michelle, a co-worker, stopped by after work with coffee and a box of security cameras. "We're setting these up tonight," she said firmly. By 8 p.m., they had cameras covering every entrance, synced to Lauren's phone. For the first time, she felt a little safer. Michelle left around 10. Lauren stayed up watching the live feed, flipping between cameras. The snowfall outside reflected faintly under the motion lights, a ghostly shimmer across the driveway. Around midnight, one feed glitched, the backyard camera. The image flickered, distorted, then froze. When it came back, something was wrong. Her shape was standing under the porch light, too close to the door. The timestamp read 12:03 a.m., but the doorbell hadn't rung. Lauren blinked, leaning closer to the screen. The figure moved slightly, a man in a dark hoodie, head tilted upward toward the camera. He smiled, then another man stepped into frame beside him. Both of them looked directly into the lens. Lauren's heart dropped as her phone buzzed. Another text, "Smile for the camera." Inside the house, she didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, she was pacing the living room, lights still on, waiting for police to review the footage. When they arrived, the officers found no one outside, no footprints, no evidence of entry. But when Lauren showed them the video, one officer frowned. "Where's this timestamp from?" he asked. "Last night," Lauren replied. He pointed to the top of the screen. "That's daylight." Lauren's stomach twisted. She zoomed in as he was right. The sky behind the men was faintly blue, not black. The footage wasn't live. It had been recorded earlier. Someone had uploaded it to her system. That meant they had access. As officers left, she changed every password, reset her router, even unplugged the cameras. But at 3:15 that afternoon, while sitting on her couch, she heard it, the faint chime of her doorbell camera activating. Her phone lit up on the table. The feed opened automatically. A man standing on her porch, staring into the lens. But this time the camera wasn't outside, it was inside, behind her. The basement door. Lauren's scream echoed through the house. She spun around, and no one was there. Her hands shaking, she grabbed a kitchen knife and backed into the hallway. The air was cold, heavy. Then she heard a soft creak, the basement door slowly inching open. The smell that drifted out was faintly metallic, damp. She hadn't been down there in months. Step by step she crept forward, knife raised. The wooden stairs groaned beneath her weight. Her phone flashlight illuminated boxes, old furniture, and a small camera light blinking red in the corner. Someone had been recording from down there. She turned toward the sound of a shuffle, a footstep behind a shelf. "Who's there?" Silence, then a whisper. "Don't scream." A man lunged from the shadows. Lauren swung the knife wildly, slicing his arm before bolting up the stairs. He followed, fast, heavy. She slammed the door and locked it, pressing her back against the wood as it shook under his hits. Then suddenly, silence. When the police arrived again, they found no one. The basement was empty, except for a blood trail leading to a small broken window. The hidden recording. The officers stayed longer this time, checking her cameras, her phone, every corner of the house. That's when one of them found something strange behind the living room vent, a hidden GoPro, still recording. The footage revealed weeks of surveillance, Lauren sleeping, cooking, showering. The intruders had been inside before she ever saw them. Every night they came and went silently through the basement window. Lauren's face went pale as the last clip played. It was dated the morning before. The camera showed one of the men standing over her bed, brushing hair from her face, then whispering, "Not yet." The officers promised to increase patrols and urged her to stay somewhere else. Lauren packed a bag and booked a motel that night. But as she left, she noticed something chilling, a small handwritten note taped to her windshield. It read, "We liked the basement best." The final knock. Lauren moved out of that house within the week. The police never caught the men. No fingerprints, no IDs, no leads. The house was rented again months later. The new tenant, a young college student, noticed the cameras still mounted in the corners when she moved in. She turned them off but never took them down. A few weeks later, she called 911 after hearing noises in the walls. When police arrived, they found fresh footprints in the snow, 2 sets, leading to the basement window. Inside, the small camera light blinked red again. The final footage recovered showed a close-up of the same 2 men, smiling into the lens. Behind them, barely visible in the reflection of the window glass, was Lauren's car. She'd been there watching, waiting, and just before the clip ended, one of the men leaned close to the camera and whispered, "We told you not to move." The Man Behind the Door, Madison, Wisconsin, winter 2018. The quiet house. Evan had just moved into a 2-bedroom house a few blocks from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It wasn't much. Creaky floors, outdated kitchen, and a draft that whistled through the hall at night. But it was cheap, quiet, and close to campus. He spent most nights grading papers or watching late-night documentaries. His only company, the steady hum of his space heater. That December night, snow blanketed the neighborhood. The streets outside were silent. Evan was sitting on his couch, laptop open, when he heard something faint like movement upstairs. He paused his movie and listened. Nothing. He tried to brush it off, probably pipes or the wind against the roof. The house was old after all, but as he got ready for bed around 2 a.m., he noticed something strange. The attic door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar. He didn't remember opening it. Cautiously, he pushed it closed and went to bed. But that night he dreamt of footsteps above him, slow, dragging steps crossing the length of the attic. When he woke up, his lamp was off and the attic door was open again. The missing food over the next few days, little things started to go missing. A granola bar, a can of soup, his favorite coffee mug. Evan blamed himself, and maybe he was just forgetful, busy with work. But one morning he came home from class and found his fridge door slightly open. Inside, half of his leftover pizza was gone. He lived alone. That night, he set up a small notepad on the counter, jotting down what was inside the fridge, determined to catch himself in a mistake. At 3 a.m., he woke up thirsty and walked to the kitchen. The fridge was open again. He turned on the light. The notepad was gone. A chill crept through him. He checked every door and window. All were locked from the inside. It didn't make sense. The next morning he found the notepad sitting on his kitchen table. The words he'd written had been crossed out, and beneath them, in shaky handwriting, someone had added a note. "Thanks for sharing." The attic sounds. Evan started hearing it again. Footsteps above him. Always late at night. Always slow. He tried convincing himself it was squirrels, but there was weight behind those steps, deliberate, human. Finally, one evening, he grabbed a flashlight and a broom for protection and climbed the pull-down attic stairs. The smell hit him first. Damp insulation and something sour, like spoiled food. His flashlight beam cut through the dust, revealing stacks of old boxes, spider webs, and a worn sleeping bag pushed into the corner. Next to it, empty food wrappers. His food. He backed toward the stairs, trying to stay quiet, when his light passed over something on the wall. A hand-drawn calendar marked with dates. Every date matched nights he'd heard movement, and scrawled beneath next Friday's date were two chilling words. "Go downstairs." Evan's pulse thundered in his ears as he backed out, locking the attic hatch tight. But that night at exactly midnight, a floorboard creaked above his bed, then another, then a voice, low and close to the ceiling. "You're home early tonight." The hidden door. The next day, Evan took off work and called the police. 2 officers searched the attic but found no one. They suggested maybe a squatter had been living there and left. Still, Evan couldn't shake the feeling he wasn't alone. He decided to install a lock on his bedroom door. While looking for tools in the basement, he discovered something odd. Behind a large shelving unit, part of the brick wall looked different. A narrow outline, almost like a doorway, had been patched with newer concrete. He grabbed a hammer and tapped it, hollow. After 10 minutes of scraping and prying, the concrete crumbled, revealing a small wooden door with a metal latch. The air that seeped out was cold, and stale inside was a narrow crawl space leading under the floorboards, straight toward the stairs that led to his room. Evan's stomach turned. Someone could move through the walls. He backed away, heart racing, and sealed the opening with heavy boxes. That night, as snow fell outside, Evan lay in bed listening. The wind howled. Then, softly, something shifted behind his wall, followed by a whisper that froze him in place. "Don't block my door again." The footage. The next morning, Evan bought a cheap security camera and hid it facing the attic door. He needed proof, something tangible to convince the police. For 2 nights, nothing happened, but on the 3rd, he woke to his phone buzzing, motion detected at 2:47 a.m. He opened the app, heart pounding. The footage showed the attic hatch slowly lowering. A pale hand gripped the ladder. Then a man crawled out, thin, long hair, filthy clothes. He crept down the hallway barefoot, moving with practiced silence. Evan's sleeping form was visible in the frame as the man paused at his bedroom door. And just watched. Minutes passed before he slipped back into the attic and vanished. Evan barely made it through watching the clip before grabbing his keys. He ran to his car, locked himself inside, and called 911. Officers searched again but found only signs of recent activity, footprints, food wrappers, and a small pocket knife near the crawlspace door, but no man. The attic window was open, leading out to the roof. Snowflakes drifted in through it, melting onto the floor. The return Evan crashed at a friend's apartment for a week, but the nightmares followed him. Footsteps, whispers, and that pale, watching face. When he returned to grab the rest of his belongings, the house felt colder, emptier. He moved quickly, avoiding looking toward the ceiling. But when he entered the kitchen, he froze. A note was sitting on the table. "You should have stayed." There were muddy footprints leading from the back door to the hallway, then stopping abruptly near the base of the attic ladder. Evan backed away, every muscle in his body tense. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the tile. From above, a low creak echoed, the sound of weight shifting. He didn't wait. He bolted out the front door and into the street, dialing the police again. When they arrived minutes later, they found the attic empty, except for the same sleeping bag. But this time, written across the attic floorboards in charcoal was a new message. "You can move, but I'll find you." The discovery Evan moved into a secure apartment complex downtown. Cameras, locks, neighbors on all sides. He finally felt safe. Months passed. He got a new job, started sleeping better, almost convincing himself it was over. Then one morning, his new landlord knocked. "Hey, weird question," the man said. "You used to live on Maple Street, right?" Evan nodded slowly. "They're renovating that old house." The workers found something under the floorboards. Evan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The landlord continued. "They said it was a small notebook, full of sketches of you, drawings from different angles, even your room layout." Evan felt sick. "The weird part," the landlord said, "is the last page had an address on it. This one." Evan slammed the door shut after he left, checking every lock twice. That night, as he sat in bed, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Miss the attic?" The final visit Evan tried to report the text, but without a number trace, there was little the police could do. Weeks went by quietly, until one night in April. He was brushing his teeth when he heard it again, a soft thud above him. There was no attic in this apartment. Just a ceiling crawl space for maintenance. Locked, sealed, another thud, louder. He stared up at the vent cover. The screws were slowly turning. Evan backed toward the door, heart pounding, phone shaking in his hand. He dialed 911. The operator answered, but before he could speak, something heavy fell inside the vent, dust spilling from above. Then a voice whispered through the duct, "Told you I'd find you." The vent cover dropped open, screws hitting the tile one by one. When police arrived, the crawlspace was empty again, but the ceiling hatch had fresh fingerprints on it. Evan moved out the next morning. The apartment remains unleased to this day. Residents say at night, when the building is silent, you can still hear faint scratching above that unit's ceiling, like someone crawling, waiting for another tenant to come home alone. The Baby Monitor Voice, Portland, Oregon, Spring 2019. Main character Sarah Jennings, 32, single mother living with her 2-year-old son, Noah. The new home Sarah had just moved into a small, 2-story townhouse on the edge of Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, a fresh start after her divorce. The street was quiet, the neighbors polite but distant. The nights, though, were too quiet. She'd grown up in the city, used to sirens, voices, the hum of life. Here the silence was heavy, the kind that made every creak sound intentional. Her son Noah slept upstairs in his nursery. Sarah had bought a new baby monitor that streamed to her phone just in case he cried at night. The first night was peaceful until around 1 a.m. Sarah woke to faint static coming from the monitor. She picked up her phone, expecting to see Noah rolling around. Instead, the camera feed showed him sitting up in bed, wide awake. Staring toward the door, Sarah frowned. "Noah," she whispered, watching the live video. Then, through the monitor, she heard a soft voice, a man's voice, whispering, "Hey, buddy, go back to sleep." Her heart stopped. There was no one else in the house. She ran upstairs, and the nursery door was open wider than before. Noah was lying down again, eyes wide open. She checked the closet, the window, under the crib. Nothing. She turned off the monitor that night, convincing herself it was interference, but deep down she knew what she heard wasn't static. The distorted signal, The next day, Sarah called the monitor's customer support line, reporting possible interference. The rep told her it could happen if someone nearby was on the same frequency. Maybe another baby monitor, a walkie-talkie, or a Bluetooth device. That made sense. But her nearest neighbors were elderly, with no kids. That evening, after putting Noah to bed, she scrolled through her phone, watching the live feed again. He slept soundly. She muted the volume. At 12:43 a.m., her phone vibrated. Motion detected. The screen lit up to show Noah awake again, looking at the same corner. But this time, something faint appeared in the background. A shape, half seen in the darkness. Sarah leaned closer. The outline of a shoulder moved out of frame. She bolted upstairs, heart slamming against her ribs. The door was slightly open. She burst in. Noah was crying, his blanket on the floor. She grabbed him, turned on every light and checked the window. Still locked from inside. When she reviewed the video the next morning, the motion clip was gone, deleted. But a new folder had appeared on her phone's camera roll, one she didn't create. It was titled, "He's Watching." Inside was a single photo, a dark, grainy image of her sleeping on the couch. The technician terrified, Sarah went to the electronics store where she'd bought the baby monitor. The technician, a young guy named Marcus, took one look at the device and frowned. "Someone's accessed this remotely," he said, scrolling through the firmware logs. "It's got a wireless vulnerability. If your Wi-Fi wasn't password protected, someone nearby could have hijacked the feed." Sarah felt her stomach drop. So someone could. "See my son?" "See him. Hear you." Even talk through the speaker. Marcus advised her to replace it immediately, reset her router and call the police if anything else happened. That night, she unplugged the monitor completely. She couldn't bring herself to throw it away, not yet. She tucked it into a drawer. At 2:15 a.m., a sound woke her. The faint click of a baby monitor turning on. She froze. The drawer was slightly open, a soft blue light glowing from inside. Then, through the still air, a voice whispered from the drawer. "You shouldn't have unplugged me," Sarah screamed, grabbing Noah and running outside. By the time police arrived, the monitor was dark, but its camera light blinked once, as if acknowledging her. The neighbor's window. The next morning, Sarah packed her things and decided to stay at her friend Kelly's apartment for a few nights. Kelly lived across the street, in a second-floor unit that overlooked Sarah's townhouse. That night, after putting Noah to bed in the guest room, Sarah stood by the window, staring at her darkened house. Something felt wrong. Then she saw it. Movement inside her old nursery window. A figure, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hood, moved past the blinds. Sarah's breath caught. She called the police again, but by the time they arrived, the intruder was gone. Officers searched the house and found no signs of forced entry. But they did find footprints in the backyard mud, fresh, leading up to Noah's window. When Sarah checked the nursery herself the next day, she noticed something else. The baby monitor. The one she'd unplugged was back on the nightstand, and now it had a new name on the device list. Daddy. She didn't even take her things. She left that house for good. But the nightmare wasn't over. The voice returns. 2 weeks later, Sarah tried to rebuild her life. New apartment, new locks, new Wi-Fi. One night, after a long shift at work, she came home, fed Noah, and tucked him in. Out of habit, she checked her phone before bed. A new notification flashed. Device connected. Baby monitor 092. Her blood ran cold. She didn't own that monitor anymore. Her phone's camera app opened by itself. The screen turned black. Then an image appeared. It was a live feed of her own bedroom. Sarah turned in terror toward her closet. The door creaked open slowly, and from within, a whisper, "Told you I'd keep watching." "Mommy!" She lunged out of bed, grabbed Noah, and ran into the hall. But the closet door slammed shut behind her. When the police arrived, the closet was empty, but in the corner of the room was her old baby monitor, the one she'd left behind. The battery was dead. It shouldn't have been able to turn on. The technician's house detectives traced the device's serial number. It led them back to the electronics store, and to Marcus, the same technician who had helped her. When officers searched his home, they found an entire wall of screens, baby monitor feeds from across the city. Dozens of families being watched, unaware, He'd been hacking into Wi-Fi networks, collecting footage, even speaking through the monitors to children. When they arrested him, one of the officers noticed a baby monitor still powered on. The feed was labeled NoahCam. The live image showed Sarah's old nursery, except the camera was positioned from inside the closet, pointed at the crib. Marcus just smiled when they showed him the footage. "She wasn't supposed to move," he said quietly. The apartment glitch months passed. Marcus was in custody. Sarah tried therapy, hoping to move on, but nightmares persisted. The sound of his whisper, the hum of the monitor, the static. One night, she was setting up a new smart baby monitor, a brand new model with encrypted security, trying to overcome her fear. She connected it to her Wi-Fi, checked the feed and saw Noah sleeping soundly. Relief washed over her. Then the camera glitched. The screen flickered, showing static, and then, for half a second, another feed appeared, her old nursery, the crib, and a faint shape standing in the corner. When she blinked, the feed snapped back to normal. Sarah unplugged the new monitor immediately, but the next morning, she found the power cord plugged back in, and on the screen, a single message appeared in white text. "I miss my family." The final transmission, Sarah stopped using monitors altogether. She got a wired alarm system, new locks, and even changed her phone number. Everything was fine for almost a year, until the night of Noah's 3rd birthday. After the party, she tucked him into bed and went downstairs to clean up. Her phone buzzed, a notification. New device connected to Wi-Fi, baby monitor, Zone 92. Her hands shook. She ran upstairs. Noah was sound asleep, but from the darkness of his room came a faint whisper, tinny, mechanical, like a voice through a speaker. "Happy birthday, buddy." She tore the room apart. Nothing. Until she noticed something taped under Noah's crib, the old monitor's speaker module. Wires dangling, battery corroded. It shouldn't have worked, but it had been modified. Tiny red LED light still blinking weakly. When she looked closer, she saw something scratched into the plastic casing with a knife. Always watching. Sarah moved again the next week. No forwarding address. No online footprint, but the family that rented her old apartment later reported something strange there. New baby monitor sometimes picked up a faint signal at night, a male voice whispering, softly through static, "Hey buddy, go back to sleep." To the knock at 3:17 a.m., Flagstaff, Arizona, winter 2021. The quiet road marked Dalton liked the quiet. After 2 tours overseas and a messy divorce, solitude was his medicine. He rented a small 1-story house off a dirt road surrounded by ponderosa pines. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. Nights in Flagstaff were cold that winter, the kind that silenced even the wind. Mark would sit by his front window sipping coffee, watching the snowflakes blur under the yellow porch light. On December 10th, he came home late from his night shift at a local auto shop. Around 3 a.m., as he hung his coat, he heard a knock. Not a normal one, slow, deliberate. 3 knocks. He frowned, peered through the peephole. Nothing but darkness. He opened the door halfway, cold air brushing his face. "Hello?" Silence. Then, as he shut the door, another knock, and softer this time, from the back door. Mark froze. There was no back porch, just a field of snow leading into the woods. He grabbed his flashlight, stepped outside barefoot, and shined the beam across the yard. Nothing, just faint footprints in the snow. Barefoot prints leading away from his house and into the forest. He followed them a few steps before realizing they weren't leading away. They circled back toward the house. The second night. The next morning, Mark convinced himself it was exhaustion. He hadn't slept properly in days. He brushed off the prints as animal tracks distorted by snow. But the following night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the knocking returned. 3 taps on the front door. Slow. Even. He grabbed his flashlight again and shouted, "Who's out there?" A man's voice answered from the darkness. Calm. "You left the door open last night." Mark's pulse spiked. "Who are you?" No answer. He turned on his floodlight, nothing but falling snow. No footprints this time. Still, when he checked the back door, it was unlocked. He always locked it. Mark pushed a chair against the handle. kept his pistol within reach and stayed awake until dawn. The next day, he installed a motion camera by both doors. That night, he reviewed the footage after hearing faint knocking again. The video showed something standing just beyond the porch light. Tall, thin, head tilted too far to one side, like its neck couldn't hold the weight it didn't knock. It just stood there, waiting. Then at 3:17 exactly, the camera glitched. Static filled the screen. When it came back, the figure was gone. But on the porch railing, written in frost, were 3 words, "Let me in." The police visit the next day, Mark took the footage to the police station. Officer Ramirez, a weary man in his 50s, played the video twice, squinting. "There's nothing clear enough to identify anyone," he said. "Could be a prank." "Kids, maybe." Mark shook his head. "That's not a kid," Ramirez sighed. "We'll do a patrol tonight. Keep your lights on. Stay inside." That evening, Mark double-checked every lock. He left all the lights on, even the garage. Around 10 p.m., snow began again, thick and silent. He sat on the couch, TV flickering in the background, pistol nearby. At 3:17 a.m., the motion alarm pinged. He opened the feed and the figure was back, closer this time. Standing right in front of the door, its face obscured by darkness. Then the porch light flickered, and for a brief second, he saw it. A man, maybe in his 40s, skin pale and cracked from cold, eyes pure black. He smiled directly at the camera. Mark froze, unable to move. Then, slowly, the figure leaned toward the lens and whispered something. The sound crackled through the speaker. "You shouldn't have filmed me." Mark backed away, locked himself in the bedroom, heart pounding. When police arrived 20 minutes later, the yard was empty again, but the officer's flashlight caught something scratched into the snow by the porch. 17 belongs to me. The history of the house, Mark decided to dig deeper. He went to the county records office the next day, requesting files on the property. The clerk, an older woman with shaky hands, frowned when she saw the address. "Oh," she murmured, "that's the Dalton place. You're staying there?" He nodded. She leaned closer. "That house was abandoned for years after the incident." "What incident?" The woman hesitated. "Back in 1998, a man named Henry Colburn lived there. He was found dead on his porch. Hypothermia. But his body was kneeling, hand raised like he was knocking. His prints were all over both doors." Mark's stomach twisted. 3:17 a.m.? he asked almost jokingly. The woman's eyes widened. "How'd you know that?" That night, Mark printed out Colburn's death record. The coroner's note mentioned body temperature consistent with outdoor exposure, beginning approximately 3:17 a.m. Mark stayed awake all night, lights blazing, blinds drawn, but at 3:17, the lights flickered again, just once. A slow knock followed, then another. When he finally opened the door, no one stood there, only an old photograph lying on the mat. It showed a man kneeling by the same door, wearing Mark's clothes. The breaking point. Mark couldn't sleep. Every creak felt deliberate. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. He set up a live camera feed, recording both doors, windows, and even his back field. When the feed pinged motion at 3:17 again, Mark didn't hesitate. He burst outside with his flashlight and gun drawn. "Show yourself," he shouted. The woods were silent. Then from behind him came the sound of 3 knocks from inside the house. He spun around, heart hammering. The front door slowly creaked open by itself. Through the threshold he saw a figure standing in his living room. Tall, pale, same cracked smile. Mark raised the gun. "Get out!" The figure tilted its head. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. Then it mimicked him, every move perfectly mirrored, like a reflection lagging by a second. Panicking, Mark fired a shot. The glass window shattered, but when he turned back, the figure was gone. The bullet hole, however, was in the opposite wall, as if he'd shot toward himself. He replayed the footage later. The figure wasn't on camera, only him, standing at the door, knocking 3 times before entering. The neighbor's account. The next morning, a neighbor, an older man named Earl, drove over. "You okay, Mark?" "Heard gunshots last night." Mark told him everything, the knocks, the man, the camera footage. Earl's face went pale. "Son, nobody lives out here but me and you. But years ago, my cousin stayed in that house. Said he'd wake up at 3:17 every night, hearing knocking from both doors. After he moved out, no one lasted longer than a month. Mark frowned. You think it's haunted? Earl's jaw tightened. I think something in that house remembers. And it wants company. That night, Earl stayed with Mark for backup. They sat in silence, both armed, both waiting. At 3:17 sharp, the power went out. The house went pitch black. Then came two sets of knocks, one at the front door, one at the back. Earl whispered, "Don't answer." Mark, trembling, whispered back, "What if it's human?" From the dark, a voice that wasn't Earl's answered, "It is." When the lights flicked back on, Earl was gone. The chair where he'd been sitting was empty. But the door beside it was wide open. Desperation Mark reported Earl missing. Search teams scoured the woods but found only one thing, a trail of barefoot prints leading from Mark's yard to the frozen creek. They vanished halfway across the ice. Mark packed his bags that night. But before he could leave, the clock hit 3:17, knocking again, this time from inside the walls. He backed toward the door, but his reflection in the window didn't move. It stood still, smiling. Then it knocked on the glass from inside 3 times. The lights flickered. When they came back, the reflection was gone. And so was Mark's shadow. He screamed, ran outside and drove off into the night, not stopping until sunrise. He never returned to that house again. But a week later, local police investigating the scene found fresh prints on the porch, barefoot, kneeling, hands raised toward the door, as if someone was still knocking, waiting to be let back in. The new tenant. 3 months later, a new tenant moved in, a young woman named Emily Rogers, relocating from Phoenix. She found the house cozy, quiet, and affordable, perfect for her remote job. She noticed odd things. The front door latch didn't quite fit, and one window always stuck. But overall it felt peaceful, until her second night. At exactly 3:17 a.m. she heard 3 knocks. She laughed nervously, assuming it was the wind. But curiosity made her check the peephole. No one there. As she turned away, the knock came again, and from the back door, she froze, whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. When she checked the backyard in the morning, she found 3 clear footprints in the snow, barefoot, large and written beside them, traced by a fingertip. "Let me back in." Emily packed her things and left by noon. The house remains empty now, lights still connected to power, motion cameras still active, but every few weeks, the feed sends a notification to local police, a motion alert. Always at 3:17 a.m. and on the porch, just at the edge of light, a faint figure kneels by the door, knocking, waiting.